I'm here, Larry. I'm here. I'm here. Don't worry. What's going on out there, rotoscouts baseball fans? Welcome to the show. It's 4 p.m. in like 20 seconds now. Larry C calling us out for a couple seconds worth of lateness there. Probably a full minute worth of lateness there, if I'm being honest. Had to go get Joker from outside, bring him in, give him some cookies. He's laying down under the desk. Hopefully we get a nice calm little afternoon out of him. Kind of a nice calm little slate for tonight. Little 5-gamer. Weird one. Really strange pitching slate. It's gonna be interesting. I think we've got a very broken kind of a slate. If Max Scherzer goes pop, I really don't know where this thing's going. So it's gonna be a fun one to play. I think after these chaotic 13 and 15 game slates the last 2 days, it was definitely a lot easier to cover. Slept in today. Had a bunch of beers last night. It's like you do most Wednesdays. Slept in. Got to take a nice casual morning through like 25 lineups in. I got to the FanDuel tournament too late for the early slate, the 12:35 that they ran, so I was only able to grab 25 shares at the last minute. So I threw 25 lineups into that. Think we're breaking about even last I checked, so, is what it is. But nice lazy kind of a day after the frantic coverage the last couple of days. So a little bit easier. Hopefully this one will be a little easier on the voice. I was fading badly toward the end of yesterday's show. Hopefully it didn't come through too much in terms of the analysis or whatever, but definitely in terms of talking and everything, I'm sure it was pretty clear that I was falling apart toward the end of that show. But it was a nice, relaxing night. We got everybody in the chat. We've got Trey, we've got Podija and Stoner hanging out, Fanatic, Larry's there, Power's there, Stephen B's in the chat. Everybody's here hanging out. So we got a weird one. Like I was saying, it is a super limited pitching slate. We'll just dive into it. Really, really limited. One of the top options of the day, probably the second on most pitching boards, second on my pitching board, is Chris Bassitt, which doesn't really make anybody comfortable. It's like Max Scherzer and then everybody else, and Max hasn't even been Max this year, so it's a weird one. It's going to be a lot of fun to get this stuff together. Larry says San Francisco lineup just dropped. Let me throw that in there. Not yet on the old schmabs here. Let me give it a reload, see if it comes up in the reload. Sometimes it does. Not yet. Anything weird in it? I'm sure we'll see it in a second from Schmabs, but let's talk Chris Bassitt first, because this is going to be a key part of the slate. I think he's going to be pretty popular on both sites. 9,600, 8,900, kind of deserves the popularity in terms of what he's done over the course of his career, and hasn't been a total disaster outside of a few starts in which he was a complete dumpster fire, if that makes sense. Like his overall season output, his stretch of, a handful of quality starts in a row there, amidst or between several just complete disaster starts. Like there are things to like about Chris Bassitt in this spot if we get the right version of Chris Bassitt. Last start, though, 5 innings, 4 strikeouts, 2 walks, 4 earned runs against Oakland, of all teams. I think we were all on that one and got burnt by it. Start before that, 3 2/3 against Texas, 3 runs, 3 earned, 5 runs, 7 hits, struck out 2, walked 3 in a short start. Start before that, give up 11 hits and 8 runs to the Orioles in 3 innings. But then the starts before that, 8 innings, 7 2/3 innings, clean starts against the Mets and the Astros. Had a clunker in 4 innings, gave up 7 runs to the Twins. But then 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 starts in a row before that. Only one of them was bad. He went 5 innings against Seattle and gave up 4 runs. Every other start there was at least 6 innings, a quality start. Like, Bassitt's typically a guy who's reliable for depth, a handful of strikeouts. 6 or 7 innings is a fair expectation for Chris Bassitt in most starts. But he's had these just complete blow-up spots, and he just really hasn't been pitching well in the last few starts. So it's a really concerning spot for Chris Bassitt here. Going up against a productive, hard-hitting Giants team that will platoon and throw bats at him, all night long. I think you need Chris Bassitt to be part of your plans in 150 lineups. If you're taking one shot at this thing, you probably just go Max Scherzer and just ride with the field and try and win it with bats, I think, tonight. There's a few value pitchers on the board. I think you have to embrace risk in terms of where we're going on this slate. Bassitt's uncomfortable, but he projects well. He's the second best option on this slate, I think. The next best guy is Taijuan Walker, if that puts things in perspective. So it's just a weird slate. Overall for Bassitt, 93 2/3, 16 starts, a 20.5% strikeout rate. That's down a couple percentage points from his good years. 4.05% home runs, 9.9% barrels. It has not been pretty. So it's an uncomfortable spot. I think for every share of Bassett you grab, you can grab giant stacks in hedge positions the other way. Lamont Wade Jr. off the top of the lineup is a hitter that I discuss a lot because I think he's always too cheap. 3,900, 3,200 for a guy with 9 home runs, a 146 WRC plus, a 415 on base percentage. Like, even if he's not hitting a ton of home runs or generating points that way, for 39, 32 at first base, you only need him to provide that correlated scoring that his 415 on base and 46% better than average run creation is going to get you. And he's got a good hard hit rate, a good barrel rate, decent home run output in 289 plate appearances. So I like going to Wade specifically when he's at the top of the lineup. He struggles against lefties a lot and drops down in the lineup a lot, but he's been better against lefties this season than in previous years. And he's just a productive guy for those prices when he leads off, especially ahead of a block of hitters that I want to get to, like Thairo Estrada. He's got moderate power, great speed, gets on base, correlates with J.D. Davis, with Jock Peterson, Patrick Bailey. I know this lineup just came out, but I'm kind of spitballing about what I've got here. Let's see if it's nope. The Astros one dropped on Schmab, so I'll grab that. So hopefully most of these guys are in the lineup that I'm talking about. Bailey's been really good as in terms of 115 plate appearances, 318, 345, 533 as a catcher, 215 ISO, 4 homers. Sable's a good lefty stick as a second catcher in the lineup, decent amount of power, 7 home runs on the season. Luis Matos, Brandon Crawford, Bryce Johnson. Depends on what we get in this lineup. As soon as I see it, I'll talk about it. On the other side, you've got Keaton Winn going for 4,000. He has made. Let me pull it back up in my my article here. He's thrown 12 innings. Both of them. Anyway, game log. Come here. So, 12 innings. It was 3 appearances, all in bulk relief. This is his first traditional start. I'm mixing up my guys who have pitched in limited or hybrid roles so far this season. So, Keaton Winn, 4 innings in the first appearance in bulk relief, 2 strikeouts, 3 walks. Second appearance went 5. Allowed a run on 3 hits and a home run, struck out 4 against the Padres. Third outing, 3 innings, 5 hits, 3 runs, 3 strikeouts against the Diamondbacks. So he's faced 3 good teams, St. Louis, the Padres, and the Diamondbacks, and had okay results, 18.8% strikeouts, 6.3% walks in the tiny sample, giving up a premium amount of high amount of premium contact, 48.6% hard hits, but 93.7 miles an hour exit velocity. But only 5.7% barrels, 2.8% home runs. That's, I think, 1 home run in that tiny sample. But so there's not a lot to really discuss with this pitcher. He's not a highly regarded prospect. He's like mid-teens organizationally. 25 years old, throws right-handed. Not a premium guy by any means. But he only costs $4,000 on the DraftKings slate, where pitching is already broken for the day. So, like, if I can book 5 innings, why not take a few shots at it? Normally, I'm not really pushing those kinds of plays all that strongly, but I think on this slate, it's completely justifiable at that price. That's a cheap hitter price on DraftKings. That's the same price as J.D. Davis costs in their lineup. It's less expensive than Thairo Estrada by $1,100 on the DK slate. So just on the idea that kid might go out, give me 5 innings, handful of strikeouts, even if he gives up a run or 2. I just need him to not get completely obliterated by a Blue Jays lineup that could easily completely obliterate him. Let's not be coy about the play here. It's a very, very good Blue Jays lineup that he's going to have to get through. I think he only needs to get through it twice for that price, though. That's probably all we're getting out of him. But a handful of strikeouts isn't out of the question. I think there's enough upside here that you can go to it at those prices. On the Blue Jays side of things, you definitely want to grab hedge positions with their bats too, especially more so if you're rostering Keaton Winn than you want to go to Giants if you're rostering Chris Bassett. It's the obvious names. It's Springer, Bo Bichette, Brandon Belt, Vladdy Guerrero off the top, Matt Chapman in the 5th spot. Dalton Varsho has kind of come on over the after a really cold start. The triple slash is still bad, 223, 289, 394. Needs to get on base a little bit more, take advantage of his pretty decent speed. But 12 home runs, 10 stolen bases. He'd be more viable if he still had that catcher out eligibility they used to carry back last year. In the outfield, he's kind of an also-ran type guy, but you get decent counting stats from him in the outfield. So you can go to him in moderate doses in Blue Jays stacks. Kind of the same thing with Merrifield. He's more limited to like stolen base upside, good hit tool, good correlated scorer. I talked about it yesterday where like I'd just like to see him hitting in front of all the power and in front of the run generation core rather than at the end of the lineup. I think he's got more value up there. For our purposes, 3,900, 2,900, second base outfield. You can definitely mix them in. Alejandro Kirk, Santiago Espinal. Decent, stick from Kirk as a catcher. 3 home runs, 202 plate appearances. Only a 91 WRC plus this year. Not great, but 3,000, 2,400. Playable, but not great. Santiago Espinal, same thing. Playable, cheap, but not great. Kind of guys that you want in 3 or 4 shares out of a bunch of Blue Jays stacks. So really, it's oddly both pitchers. I don't know that I would go to the win play on the FanDuel slate. In 150 lineups, you can probably get away with it. That's how limited the pitching is on this. We have to keep in mind one of these 5 games is at Coors Field. So at 55, I don't think he's going to get us a quality start. Even in a game where he goes well, I just don't really see 6 innings. 5 innings, maybe a win on the right night is possible. Maybe a handful of strikeouts, and if everything else goes bust at 55, maybe you've bought yourself the right bats to be in a good position. It's a much more interesting, more realistic play for the $4,000 price as an SP2 on DK and just roll with whatever he gets you. So that's kind of the focus with Keaton Wynn. And then Chris Bassett, I think, is just, you got to get invested in him on both sites. Unfortunately, it's not going to be a fun ride. It's probably going to get ugly fast. It could definitely go bust. And if there's a guy that you say at popularity I want to undercut, I'd probably rather undercut what I think is going to be pretty significant Chris Bassett popularity and maybe just ride with the field on whatever the field ends up with on Max Scherzer, or slightly undercut Max, take a bigger undercut to Chris Bassett and spread those shares out to not necessarily the Keaton Wynns of the world, but maybe the Taijuan Walkers and Kyle Hendrickses of the world. God, it's an ugly slate. Did we get that Giants lineup, schmabs? Here we go. Lamont Wade, Thairo Estrada, Jock Peterson, J.D. Davis, Patrick Bailey, Blake Sable, Austin Slater in the lineup late, Luis Matos, and Brandon Crawford. So basically the lineup we talked about. Slater's a good bat, hitting 7th. You don't want to get overexposed to a 7-hitter that's that profile of a hitter. Kind of a put the ball in play, correlated scoring type, but a good hitter to have down there. 3,326, 2 homers on the season, 2 steals, 391, 435, 516, creating runs 65% better than average in 69 plate appearances. That will all normalize, but he's a good hitter. 10.5% barrels last year, handful of home runs last year. What did he go? 7 home runs in 325, 12 steals. Year before, 12 steals, 12 homers, 15 steals in 306. So a capable guy. Jump to the next game. Make sure you're hitting that like button. Hit the subscribe. Kevin O says, nice calls last night. You win some, you lose some. We missed some. We got some right last night. But how about Domingo Armand, by the way, with that perfect game? Anybody watch that? I had that on the TV all night long while I was hanging out, playing some online poker, drinking some beers, talking to my buddy Charlie. It was fun to watch. Not the best guy in the world necessarily, but, hey. We forgive and forget and give people second chances in life, and seems like he had has turned things around for himself, and obviously just an amazing accomplishment. 24th in Major League history, so pretty awesome to watch. 4th in Yankees history. Trey's here for all the Taijuan. Yeah, I'm gonna have some of them. Trey says Toronto hasn't been great of late either. Yeah, Vladdy's having that weird year at the plate, which is worth talking about really, really quickly. He announced today that he's going to be in the home run derby, despite his kind of a power outage this season. 11 home runs is nothing to sneeze at, and 341 plate appearances. For many players, that would be good. For Vladdy Guerrero, that's under what we expect. Only a 168 ISO on the season. Still ridiculous contact, though. 13% barrels, 56.5% hard hits. Both of those are up from what he did last year. So I just expect that it's going to turn around. Some of the balls are going to go over the wall. Some of the doubles and triples will, fall in correctly, and his ISO will normalize. So I think there's a lot of upside, obviously, for Vladdy Guerrero, both in this spot. And he's cheap, 5,235 for Vladdy. That's cheap. So with major upside in this spot, with the ability to put Brandon Belt in the outfield on DK now, which is huge at his $2,900 price, that helps afford the rest of those guys. So Vladdy will be fine. But yeah, I mean, the Blue Jays have been up and down kind of all season. A lot of these teams have. George Springer was underperforming early in the season. He's kind of normalized now, 271, 334, 419, 11 homers, 12 stolen bases, 12% better than average creating runs. Bichette's obviously a star and has kind of been rocking and rolling for most of the season, but he's kind of cheap too. But yeah, there is some potential that this kid gets through 5 clean innings, and it doesn't even have to be perfect. It's just 5 innings with 2-3 runs and a handful of strikeouts at 4,000 is probably okay. 1 second, let me tell the dog to lie down. Hey, Joker, go lay down, buddy. You were being so good to start the show. I don't have any more cookies. Just go lie down. He's just enthusiastic. That's all. I think I'm gonna go see Indiana Jones tonight. If it's not like sold out to the gills, I try and get to the theater when it's like not quite so packed. That way I can just like pig out on popcorn and like not sit there thinking about what the person next to me is thinking about, the guy stuffing his face who went to the movies by himself, stuffing his face with popcorn. These are the things I think about when I'm at the movies. But yeah, Indy comes out today. The last one. The New York Post ran a headline of their review that I didn't read, but it seems like they didn't like it. And the headline was, "End this franchise." It's like, well, fucking, he's like 82 years old. Like, this is the last movie. Like, they've announced that. Like, you're not breaking any ground there, whether you like the movie or not, assholes. Brewers and Mets. Max Scherzer. 11 grand from Max on DK is totally correct on this slate. 97 on FanDuel should make him ridiculously explosively popular. He's the easy, obvious play of this slate. 26.2% strikeouts, 5.5% walk rate. Perfectly good for any normal pitcher. For Max Scherzer, the strikeouts are down by 4 or 5 percentage points, down about 8-9 percentage points from 2 years ago. So, you're getting a diminished version of Max, but I don't think it's a full-time diminished version. I think we've just hit some bumps in the road along the way this season, and ultimately he's winding around to figuring everything out. Has had a couple effective starts in his last couple, 70 2/3, 13 starts. 3.95 on the ERA is high, 3.98 is high on the xFIP for him, but 14% swinging, 28% CSW. Max is going to be fine. He's giving up a little bit more power than normal. Maybe that feeds into some of these Brewers bats. I think you can take a hedge position against all the Max ownership by rostering some of these Brewers bats, but Max is the dominant pitcher du jour. It makes a ton of sense to just kind of ride with the field and go with Max. It's a dominant pitcher, has been over the course of time one of the best pitchers of his generation. Like, there are a lot of reasons to go to Max Scherzer on what is an incredibly limited pitching slate here. Larry says that Indy got 65-70% on Rotten Tomatoes. Yeah, look, I'm expecting kind of a fun ride, land the plane. I'm happy with that. Was not a fan of Crystal Skull, and that was Spielberg and Lucas doing it. I liked Logan, the Wolverine movie that James Mangold directed. So I've got reasonable expectations, but tempered expectations. We're talking about an 80-something-year-old Harrison Ford still playing the part. So like, we're obviously not getting Raiders of the Lost Ark here, which is one of my favorite movies of all time. Trey says I still watch the series on AMC all the time. Yeah, I was planning on doing a plow through all 4 before I went and saw this one just for the fun of it, and didn't get to it today. And hadn't gotten to it earlier in the week, but I've seen all of those movies so many times, including so many times just when they're playing on cable over the last year, that like I could literally act out Raiders of the Lost Ark for you guys if I had like just give me a start and I'd be able to do any scene. I've seen them that many times. As a kid, I never knew the Temple of Doom was supposed to be bad. Or not supposed to be, but was like regarded as bad. I also didn't realize it was a sequel when I was a kid until later on in life. I noticed that, like, oh, this took place before. But yeah, never really realized that Temple of Doom was supposed to be bad. I loved Temple of Doom as a kid. But I mean, Raiders is like its own thing, right? Raiders is just a great movie, great action movie. Spielberg at the peak of his powers. Temple of Doom is fine. Ultimately, it's got a lot of problems these days. If you look back on like the treatment of people who in India and everything, not the best. But that aside, perfectly fine, good, serviceable indie romp. Last Crusade, obviously awesome, fun ride. Sean Connery, all that great stuff. And as Dennis says, like Crystal Skull wasn't even that bad. I do agree. Like there are good moments in that flick. It's got some good classic indie stuff. It brought Marion back. You've got some good stuff. It's got Shia LaBeouf in it. That's a problem. It's got Shia LaBeouf swinging through trees like with monkeys on vines in a key moment, which is just completely insanely bad. The one criticism of that movie that I never really understood was people who were like, aliens, interdimensional bullshit, like, crystal skulls. We're talking about a franchise in which we had magic rocks ripping a guy's heart out while he was still alive, the Lost Ark of the Covenant, the literal power of the Christian God coming down from heaven, the literal Holy Grail and Cup of Christ. Like, why are aliens a stretch in this? Why is interdimensional beings a stretch in this? I never understood that criticism. So weird. Shia LaBeouf, oof, yeah, Larry, I'm with you on that one. You know what is actually a pretty decent Shia LaBeouf performance is that movie Fury, the tank movie. That it was him, Brad Pitt, Barenthal, and I forget what the main kid's name was. That was a good flick. It's been on cable a little bit. Clearly on a 5-gamer we have time for this. Yeah, Steven, exactly. Can kind of meander a little bit, and it's just such a weird slate. But yeah, to dive back into this one a little bit. So you got Scherzer. I think you just play the hell out of Scherzer and try and get different with your bats, try and get different elsewhere. It does make sense too if he's going to be 65% owned on DK, 40% owned on FanDuel. You can carve out a little bit from that, undercut the field a little bit, still have a huge chunk of Max Scherzer, and then spread some shares out. It's just such limited options to spread things around on, including Adrian Hauser on the other side of this one. 69, 66 for Hauser. He's been back and forth working in a bulk relief role and a traditional starter role. He's obviously working as a traditional starter in this spot. Hasn't been good overall. In his last couple outings, he was in the bulk relief role. In two, actually no, it was one bulk relief appearance. I guess one just regular relief appearance. Only went one inning, and that one struck out one, allowed 2 hits. That was on the 23rd. On the 19th, he went 4 in bulk relief, allowed 2 runs, struck out 1, walked 2 against Arizona. A traditional start the game before that was ugly. 4 innings, allowed 5 runs, 4 strikeouts, 4 walks against Oakland. Not great. He had a 7-inning start before that against Cincinnati at Cincinnati that was okay, but only struck out 2. So, like, you kind of know what you're getting with Adrian Hauser. You're not getting a lot of strikeouts, even in a good game. You're not getting a big innings total for most likely. He could go like 6 or 7 clean here, but it's a very low end play. I think he's not off the board at 69, 66. Obviously more on the DraftKings board, but it's a thin path to success with this pitcher. 14% strikeouts on the year, a 4.02 ERA, a 1.54 WHIP, 6.5% swing, 22.1% CSW. This is going to be common for several of the pitchers that we're going to talk about today, these kinds of numbers. 15.2% strikeout rate last year with 6.4% swinging over 102 2/3 in a bigger sample. 17.5% in 142 innings the year before that. Not a good strikeout pitcher over time. Hasn't really been a good pitcher at all over time. Adrian Hauser's very, very gettable. One thing he does well is he's one of these guys that keeps launch angle down, cuts barrels, limits home runs. He's done that effectively this season. 7.2 degrees on the launch, 4.3 on the barrels, 1.68% home runs. Year before, 1.76% home runs on 10.3 degrees, 5.6% barrels. Year before that, 1.4 degrees, 2% home runs, 5% barrels. So he misses barrels, he limits premium contact, but there's so much contact available, so few strikeouts. A fairly, above average walk rate, plenty of opportunity to get on base, sequence, create runs. And the Mets are fairly good at that. Nimmo gets on base at a very good clip at 369, also has power, also creates runs on his own. 10 home runs on the season, a 46.5% hard hit rate for Brandon Nimmo. Joker's literally just like licking my fingers right now, by the way. It's kind of weird. Thank you, buddy. I appreciate it. Marte, up and down this season, but still has speed, still can create runs when he gets on base. He's very cheap at 3,700, 2,900. 83 WRC plus for him. It hasn't been good this season. Every time he starts to show a little bit of life, he backslides. The average goes up, the average comes down, the on base goes up and comes down. But he does have 21 steals, is an effective enough guy at price. Lindor is very cheap for his talent. 16 home runs on the season, 224. The power's been fine for Lindor. Contact profile's actually well up over last year. It's just the triple slash that's been bad. 224, 307. That front end of that triple slash should be higher for Francisco Lindor. But as long as the power's there at 45, 34, that's a good buy at shortstop. Pete Alonso's under 5,000 on the DK slate. That's a little weird going up against Adrian Hauser. Even without a significant, home run profile, Pete Alonso can hit a home run against anybody. He's just got to get the right pitch and just, elevate it, and he'll be fine for power here. So I like Alonso's upside, but you can see 8.14 is below the magic number in terms of the home run model. By the way, I think it was Larry that mentioned Tellez yesterday. Even against Scherzer, we're pulling a 10, but just at the line. And actually, Tellez is interesting. I was looking at him today, because he does have a limited hard hit rate. He's actually come down in terms of his contact profile pretty significantly this year. The X slug is interestingly really low. He's got a 300 something, 380 something X slug. behind his 401 slugging percentage, which is a low slugging percentage for him. He's been, traditionally 460s up to 500s. So interesting note that you put in my head on Tellez and why he's consistently floating above that average. He is a tremendous home run hitter. He's got 12 on the season, so I think it's with good cause. But it's just interesting to watch his contact profile, what his expected slugging percentage looks like, some of the predictive indicators going forward. So I was glad we talked about that yesterday. Anyway, Pete Alonso, deadly home run hitter against anybody. The price is down on DK. The price is normal on FanDuel at 41, but I think you can go to Alonso. And he's not a home run or bust type either. 19.7% strikeouts. Very good at putting bat on ball, just hitting it hard, keeping it in play. So Alonso can give you some production even if he doesn't hit one over the wall. Tommy Pham's been ripping the ball 15.2%, barrels 51.2% hard hits for Tommy Pham. 8 home runs, 9 stolen bases. Hit one off the second deck yesterday. Just really has put up a really good season in 191 plate appearances, and he's a guy who has been a very productive player over time. Tommy Pham's got multiple seasons of double-digit home runs, double-digit steals in the ledger. He just wasn't expected to do that this year or have a full-time job this year, but he's played his way into one. So for price, for probably still a lack of popularity, I think you can go to Tommy Pham against Hauser here. McNeil, slap hitter, needs the other guys to drive him in. Vogelback, obviously lefty pop, but against the guy who we maybe think has the idea of being able to limit home runs. Vogelback maybe is a little bit limited in his upside. You can see that in the home run model. For price, it's fine to take a few shots in Met stacks. Alvarez and Beatty. Alvarez, for all that he's come down to earth in terms of his triple slash, still has tremendous power at the plate, any given slate upside, and just is doing a tremendous job. If you watched any of Senga's start last night, Senga was just throwing everything in the dirt with that splitter of his, and this kid's just blocking everything. He had a tremendous game just in terms of playing the catcher position last night. So just really fun young player to watch, and was not expected to be at this level yet. So it's impressive to watch, and regardless what happens with the hit tool, the power's there. I think he's going to finish out a nice season and never look back in terms of this catcher job in Queens for quite a while. And then Beatty, a decent stick for 2,900, 2,400, good amount of power. At third base only, it's kind of limited in terms of his upside here, but he can turn on one. He can provide some value at the bottom of the lineup. If you're drawing shares against Scherzer, which, like I said, I do think is viable, we're obviously going to Yelich off the top of the deck. 4,200, 3,300 is just too cheap for Christian Yelich. He's not a superstar anymore, but this is relatively star-ish kind of output. 9 home runs, 18 stolen bases, a 121 WRC plus, 372 on base, 277, 372, 435. He hits the ball really, really hard when he makes contact. 10% barrels, 54.5% hard hits. He's got elite numbers in a lot of ways. Doesn't strike out a ton, walks a lot. 4,200, 3,300 is too cheap for that player. So I think we take advantage of that. Jesse Winker is very, very cheap because he's been very, very bad. But he's shown a little bit of life over the last handful of days. I'm not even talking about I don't think it's even been a week yet. But in this Mets series, he's shown a little bit of life. So in hitting second, lefty bat, a guy who was a 300 hitter with 25 home runs 2 years ago, there's some reason to go there, especially if you're going to Brewers. It has appeal at those prices. Willy Adames, tons and tons of power, but a limited hit tool. You know what you're getting with Willy Adames. Only an 80 WRC plus, but 12 home runs over 297 plate appearances. Rowdy, I just touched on, is cheap for his power upside, despite where the X slug is sitting, where the contact is down to. Still 12 home runs on the season for Rowdy. Puts bat on ball fairly well. Brian Anderson, Victor Caratini, Bryce Turang, Blake Perkins, Joey Weimer. A lot of good mix and match pieces with some ability for counting stats, a little bit of power, a little bit of speed as you mix and match your way through that. Weimer's an interesting player. 11 home runs, 10 stolen bases on the season. Only an 87 WRC plus, only 213, 286, 410 in the triple slash. But cheap. Puts bat on ball well with a 12.2% barrel rate. Plays basically every day. So he's kind of an interesting option down here. Turang is kind of limited so far. 9 stolen bases. Hasn't been great. At least hits lefty, multi-position eligible on both sides. And dead minimum priced on FanDuel. There's a little bit of value there. 3,000's a bigger asking price on the DK slate. Not as good. Caratini can hit you the odd long ball as a switch hitting catcher. He's got 3 on the season. 50.7% hard hit rate for Caratini in the small sample. Only 106 plate appearances. But a guy who, has proven that he can hit a major league home run from time to time off of a Max Scherzer that's been giving him up a little bit more than average this year. So, strong interest in Scherzer. It's going to be super, super, super popular. I think you can undercut, but I think playing him at the field's level is perfectly fine. Obviously the best pitcher on the slate by a wide margin. Projects by a wide margin to be the best pitcher on the slate. Hauser in very small doses because the price just isn't a good enough value. But I do think there's reason to give him at least a handful of shares, just on the idea of 6 or 7 clean innings, maybe 4 strikeouts, maybe a win if they get to Scherzer. It's not great. It's very thin. Obviously more relevant as an SP2 on a short slate on DK at 69. He's much more playable over there than he's on the FanDuel slate. And then Mets bats for sure, and some Brewers bats coming back the other way against Scherzer. I think it's viable. Astros and the Cards coming up on the halfway point. Let's see what's going on in the chat. Saw someone mention Shy on podcast. Even Keanu wants another part to that movie, the Constantine movie. Yeah, I saw that LaBeouf. I haven't heard that episode of Barenthal's podcast, but I saw that he had done that. I thought I want to listen to that. I'm kind of interested. Shia LaBeouf's not an uninteresting guy. Like, he seems like a thoughtful kind of a guy. I don't know if his thoughts are good ones or bad ones necessarily. And he's obviously one of these, I'm being artistic type guys, type people that kind of get on the nerves a little bit. But he's clearly got some thoughts in his head. So I'd be interested to, hear his take on stuff. But it just makes, those weird decisions, like, those weird, like, you're just going too far. Artist decision, like he cut his face and scarred himself and ripped out one of his teeth for that Fury movie. And everybody was like, well, nobody asked you to do that. It's like, just weird decisions. Anyway. Seem remorseful. Yeah, exactly. Trey. Everybody's fallible. There's things that are more forgivable than others, obviously, in life. But everybody does get a second shot. And if it's hopefully you feel legit remorse and see legit remorse when guys screw up in that specific way. Never a good thing to see, but life does have to move on in ways, as does this podcast or show or whatever the hell we call these. Let me see if we got lineups here. Which game are we talking about? We're on the Astros and the Cardinals, dummy. There's the Astros. Come on. Chas McCormick hitting 9th for the Astros. Bly Madras in the lineup again. Let's see what we get here. All right. So, interesting pitching matchup here. The corpse of Adam Wainwright on the mound for St. Louis at 6,500, 6,300 is pulling a playable on this slate kind of a projection. I don't necessarily believe in it, given that he's striking out 10.9% with a 5.8% swinging strike rate against a fairly capable Astros lineup. But, like, they've been really down this year. Not in the sense that, like, they've been down, so therefore they can't hit this version of Adam Wainwright. But if I'm hunting for reasons to play Adam Wainwright on the mound, which I don't necessarily want to do, but I think is something we have to do in this one, they have been underperforming outside of, Jose Altuve in his limited plate appearances has been about right. But everybody else in this lineup has kind of underperformed. Jose Abreu's kind of come on over recent weeks. He's up to 6 home runs, a 102 ISO, a 72 WRC plus. That was all a lot worse a couple weeks ago. So maybe he's coming on a little bit. Maybe he'll normalize to finish the season, which would be a big bump to this lineup. Bump to people who get out ahead of the curve DFS-wise, because he's still cheap. He's still not going to be all that popular even in Astros stacks. Jainer Diaz has been good. Julks is like up and down, gives you, a little bit of production here and there, has had a couple big DFS days, 6 home runs, 12 stolen bases, but ultimately a 91 WRC plus, 257, 297, 393, a 136 ISO, 4.6% barrels, 32.5% hard hits. Not a great option in the outfield. Madras, Jeremy Pena's not been great. I do like Chas McCormick to end the lineup there. Productive in limited plate appearances, but it's not a great Astros lineup, especially without Jordan Alvarez in continued on a continued basis with his injury. You're just dealing with such a diminished version of Wainwright that it's like you can throw that dart, but don't expect it to win. If it wins, it's a miracle. You didn't necessarily get lucky, but you got a semi-miraculous performance, a throwback performance from this pitcher. What we're looking for is some depth. I want 6 innings. I want a quality start somehow. And if I only get 3 strikeouts out of it, fine. I'll take that on this slate because he's so cheap that it's a bad play. I think it's like a necessary shares kind of a bad play. JP France is a better option on the other side. 8,000, 8,700. It's obviously a different price tier. He projects worse in this model, but the model's giving Wainwright a little bit more credit than I think I would given all the contact that the Astros are going to manage against him here, the lack of strikeout upside. So I feel like France is in the better spot here despite a higher price and a lower projection. He's got a better strikeout rate by a lot this year, 18.8%. Young kid pitching to a 3.54 ERA, a 4.61 xFIP. There's been warts for sure, 8.6% barrels, a 4.02% home run rate. Makes mistakes and makes them loudly when he does. Puts too many guys on base with a 1.26 whip, an 8% swing, walk rate. 10.2% swinging strikes is fairly effective. He's just going up against a really good Cards lineup that I don't love to throw pitchers at. So you're getting probably no Nolan Arenado in the Cards lineup today, which does diminish them a little bit. There's still a lot of really good bats here. So I worry about France. I worry about him at price, but I think there's definite upside. He's one of the more playable pitchers on this slate, I think. I will definitely take some shares of the Cards on the other side of that equation, though. Assuming no Arenado, we're looking at Brendan Donovan, Lars Nootbaar, and Nolan Gorman as premium lefty bats from in like basically that order probably. Donovan is a good lefty correlated scoring bat with a good hit tool, a moderate amount of power. He's got 8 home runs and 284 plate appearances this year. We're more looking at him for cheap correlated scoring. 3,400, 2,600, first base and second base eligible on DK, second base only on FanDuel. He just clicks in nicely with Goldschmidt and with when Arenado's in the lineup, Arenado. With this version of the lineup, you get him, then you get a good blend of good contact, power, and speed from Lars Nootbaar. He's missed a lot of time in and out of the lineup with injuries, but 260, 364, 373, 4 home runs, 5 stolen bases, and 209 plate appearances. And then Gorman on the other side is just a premium power bat. Low in terms of the triple slash, 238, 322, 467 is a decent slugging percentage, 229 ISO, 15 home runs. Hit a lot of those earlier in the season and has been just tragically bad for like all of June, the back half of May. But there's plenty of potential here. His power is not going to have just completely vanished. 13.1% barrels overall, 49.4% hard hits, cracking the magic number in the home run model. So I really like throwing Nolan Gorman back at JP France. And then you've got Goldschmidt sitting here, superstar player still. Last year's NL MVP, 14 home runs this year, 40% better than average creating runs this year. Paul Goldschmidt's certainly not dead despite the underperformance of the Cardinals in general. Wilson Contreras hasn't been good, but is a playable catcher bat on a short slate. Jordan Walker, Alec Burleson, Paul DeYoung, Tommy Edman, all playable parts in a mix and match basis from the bottom of this lineup. So this is a lineup that continues to play like 1 through 9 in most of its forms for me. It's limited exposures to these guys. Like I talked about yesterday, you want to be getting one of these guys mixed in with these guys or these guys, through the middle, not 3 of these guys and Lars Nootbaar. That's where people go wrong with I need to go to the bottom of the lineup, the under-owned guys, grab guys in good lineups, in good stack ratings, but from the bottom because they're all cheap and under-owned. These guys are all relevant. These guys, one of these guys, if the cards go off, will provide a slate relevant score for sure. But you want one of them or maybe 2 of them in conjunction with the premium bats in the lineup. You don't want to grab 3 of those guys and 1 of the premium bats. So just, again, to note construction things for at the basic level of how lineup should come together. So on the Houston side, we talked about that lineup a little bit. So it's really more enthusiasm for JP France. I think he's a more realistic option. I don't love the price, but I think it's just a tax for getting a somewhat realistic option. But I want a lot of cards coming back the other way against him. I think there's home run upside. I think there's plenty of power, run creation, sequencing upside. We'll see if Arenado's in the lineup. If he is, so much the better. If he's not, it looks exactly like what we're seeing here. Definite interest in Cards bats, and then reluctant interest in Adam Wainwright just because of the cheap price, the short slate, and the opportunity to pitch 6 innings of mediocre baseball. Not expecting many strikeouts. I'm expecting probably a lot of bat on ball for the Astros. You got to just hope he keeps the ball in the yard, doesn't get blown up in the first or second inning, manages a handful of clean innings. It's not a good play. It's more relevant on DK, again, for the value price. I think it's just, a more relevant DK play, but I think you can go there at the cheap price on FanDuel, and on this slate, you reluctantly have to. You don't want to only have Scherzer, Taijuan Walker, and JP France, or, you want to mix in some of these oddballs, as ugly as it might be. And we've got 2 of them in this game. Let's see what's going on in the chat for a sec. Torkelson's got 2 home runs today. Nice. You took him out of your... That sucks. We've talked about Torkelson a few times. I think it's coming together for the kid in subtle ways. The contact profile was up. The barrels, the hard hits were at a decent point. He was walking at a decent clip. It hadn't really been translating to stats overall, but I think it will come together for him a little bit. Kind of like Tristan Casas. I was talking yesterday about I expect a big second half from Tristan Casas. Would have dropped for Houston Jordan at DH to Bly Madras. Yeah, that's a little bit of a drop. Moose hit one and Renfroe hit one. Damn, homes are flying out in the afternoon slate. Bo T. Jensen owner says early slate garbage fucking my buzz and my pizza appetite. Oh my god, that poor give up 9 runs in 2 2/3 is pitching against the Dodgers in course today. Yeah, we'll get there. Dodgers are an obvious inflection point. It's what happens with the Dodgers in Coors Field and what happens with Max Scherzer. Those are your 2 inflection points for this slate. If both of them connect, it's going to go one very public direction. If both of them fail, it's going to be anybody's ball game and weird things are going to happen. If one hits and the other doesn't, it'll be all over the place. So it's going to be a fun one to watch. But those are your 2 big inflection points for sure. But then getting into this one, let's see if we have lineups while I tee it up. But soft tossing Kyle Hendricks going for the Cubbies. Works in the 80s, but eats innings kind of effectively from time to time. Can certainly give you 6-7 clean innings in the right night. Is definitely in play, in my opinion. It's, again, not a good play. It's another guy that we're talking about a very limited strikeout upside. 12.9% strikeouts on the season. 2.60 ERA is very good. A .98 whip is very good in his 34 2/3 innings, 6 starts. So giving you decent depth there. But only 12.9% strikeouts, 7.1% swinging strikes. It's not great. 27.8% CSW is pretty decent with only a 7.1% swinging. A lot of called strikes there. A strike thrower, a capable veteran, and struck out more last year, 18.5% last year, 16.7% the year before. He's a soft-tossing, contact-oriented pitcher. We know who Kyle Hendricks is. We're not going to fool ourselves into thinking that 10 strikeouts are on the table in this start. But he only costs $71,800. It could be cheaper for the value pricing on this slate, but he's definitely more reliable than some of the value priced pitchers on this slate. I think Hendricks right now in this matchup is probably a better pitcher than Adam Wainwright in his current form in his matchup. So it's priced like that. It doesn't necessarily project like that. Hendricks gets a lower projection just because there's more historical upside from Wainwright that's still tickling the model a little bit. So Wainwright's projecting better, but I think I kind of like Hendricks a little bit better. A little bit more faith that that's real. Limited doses of both guys though. It's a dart throw on both of these guys. I think you've got better shot at some clean innings, at 6 clean innings, maybe a quality start out of Hendo than you do out of Waino. But it's really dicey. On the other side, Taijuan Walker, 8,800, 9,500. The FanDuel price is unfortunate. I expect that it'll at least keep ownership kind of light, which is good because I think he's the second or third most viable pitcher on this slate, which is weird. Taijuan's the definition of a league average pitcher over time. Over the last 3 years, just been right around league average. Last year, 3.49 ERA, 3.89 xFIP, a 20.3% strikeout rate. The year before, 22.3% strikeouts, 4.47 ERA, and matching xFIP. Gives up home runs, gives up a little bit of premium contact, but not terrible for it. 3.98% home runs 2 years ago on 9.8% barrels. Last year, 2.31% home runs on 7.3% barrels. Last year was a fairly effective year. Not a big strikeout year, but the walks were in check. The power was in check last year. The ERA was good. The xFIP was fine. Not as good this year, but fine. 3.21% home runs. Barrels are back up a little bit at 8%. ERA is at 4.1. xFIP's back at 4.41. This is probably who he is. The walks are up this year. The strikeouts are normalized. So not a good pitcher, but an effective enough one. I always try and remind both myself and when I'm on shows writing articles or whatever, a league average pitcher has a handful of good starts every year. We might be able to capture one here. The Cubbies, for all their on-base talent, their run scoring ability, don't hit a ton of home runs. They've got power. They've got guys who should have more home runs on the season, but they've just not hit them. They've got a lot of lower X slugs than what I would normally expect from some of these hitters. A lot of lower, obviously actual slugging percentages and home run output. So Cubbies haven't been great. I think they could certainly string together some runs against Taijuan here. I will have shares of the Cubs on the other side, But I think I'm going to have an unfortunately large investment in Taijuan Walker shares, especially if he's as low owned as I think he might be on the FanDuel slate. So I'm curious to see where he falls. When I was looking earlier on RGs, it was Scherzer by a wide margin, and then I think Bassett, and then everybody else in the single digits. So if I can pick off Taijuan and take a position on in the single digits against the Cubs, I think it's viable. The wind's blowing out, but only slightly in Wrigley. You take a position on the Cubs, you take a position on Taijuan, and hopefully not too much of the field is on it. He'll be more popular, I think, at 88 on DK where you need two pitchers, and justifiably so. But I think he's very playable over there at 88. If you're going to Cubs, depending on what we get in the lineup, obviously, Mike Tauchman, decent correlated scoring piece, quad A type player, quad A talent, 2 homers, 3 stolen bases, and 125, but knows how to get on base, an okay hit tool. So I think Tauchman's playable for cheap prices, 25, 28 up top. You're not spending anything on him. Nico, decent source of stolen bases, a good hit tool. Seiya Suzuki, Ian Happ, Dansby Swanson, all get on base at very good clips, 338, 384, 357 for those 3 guys. All 3 of those guys should have more home runs than they do. Ian Happ and Dansby Swanson, we've seen hit double-digit home runs into the 20s, steal double-digit bases. Dansby in particular, 9 home runs, 4 stolen bases, kind of behind the curve from my expectations from that player. Not a great Dansby Swanson season, still a 13.2% barrel rate. He's always maintained good barrel rates, knows how to put the right part of the bat on the ball, elevate the ball, hit it with authority. Just hasn't translated into home runs for him this year. Only a 149 ISO, still creating runs 15% better than average though, and is fairly cheap for his talent at shortstop. If you get him, Happ, Suzuki together in the middle of the lineup, Cody Bellinger, obvious upside in the heart of the lineup from the left side, all his home run power. We talked about him yesterday in terms of as long as he's able to limit strikeouts, I think the comeback that he was showing earlier in the year before he got hurt is kind of real. 7 home runs, 10 stolen bases in that 199 plate appearances so far. And then a weak bottom end with Jared Young, Nick Madrigal, Tucker Barnhart. So like 1 through 6, if it's this version, I think the Cubbies are playable. If you get like, an alternate version where maybe Dansby's hitting second, Nico's leading off, Tauchman's not in the game. That is better for Dansby and for whoever the hell I said, Nico. And then like Suzuki and Happ will be where they are. Cody Bellinger probably slides up to 5 in that scenario. I think that's all still very playable. Like Tauchman wouldn't decide that for me, but he's a good bolt-on piece. But really it's like 2 through 6 in this version of the lineup that have appeal there. And then obviously you're playing Phillies back against Kyle Hendricks. For every share of Kyle Hendricks you click on, you can click on 2 or 3 shares of Phillies in other lineups. There's tremendous upside for them. Hendricks isn't lousy for home runs. Obviously, 0.72 home runs. That's probably 1 home run in those 6 starts. I didn't actually check that. But he's never been totally lousy for home run upside. But there are some tremendous lefty home run hitters in this lineup. There are some just tremendous hitters up and down this lineup in general. We talked about it yesterday with the weak bottom end they showed against the lefty yesterday. When they're facing a righty, you usually get the better bottom end with Bryson Stott, with Brandon Marsh, with Cody Clemens in it. So that's what we get today. All 3 of those lefties are in the bottom of the lineup. So I like going to one of those guys in stacks of Phillies. Brandon Marsh, probably my favorite out of that group. 7 home runs on the season, a 124 WRC plus for Marsh. Hits the ball really hard. 51.7% hard hit rate, 9.7% barrels. Only cost you $3,270 in the outfield. That's cheap for that hitter. It would probably be better to have him hitting 6th behind Real Muto and then run Bryson Stott 7th or even 9th and bump like Harrison up to 7th behind Marsh and Clemens hitting 8th. But we'll take what we get in this form. That's fine. Bryson Stott, good correlated scoring piece. You can bolt him on ahead of Marsh and play both of those guys with a Castellanos, Harper, Turner kind of a stack. But obviously all the qualities up at the top of the lineup for the Phillies. You get all of Schwarber's talent, all of his massive power, 14.39 in the home run model, one of the slate leaders. Basically all the Dodgers, and then Kyle Schwarber, I think, is how the home run model falls today. Bryce Harper cracking the magic number. Harper, I think with the Tommy John, surgery is still struggling for his power. I don't know that we see the full comeback for power this year, but he's still been effective. 110 WRC plus, gets on base, will steal bases, probably will get more aggressive about stealing bases as the season goes on if he's not hitting for power. And the barrels are there. 13% barrel rate is just right on form from last year. Just hasn't fully delivered, but priced appropriately for this production. I think you'd definitely go to Harper. So it's up and down the lineup for the Phils. I think you can get to him in decent shares. Nicky Castellanos, who we talked about yesterday, remains extremely cheap at $4,400 despite having a great season. Don't know why, but I'll take the discount while I can get it. So this one's reluctant interest in Kyle Hendricks, but I think it's a necessity. Not necessarily a great value price, but I think one of the better options to give you that 6 clean innings or 6 okay innings and a score with 3 or 4 strikeouts kind of a performance. On a low-end pitching slate, I do think he's relevant. Taijuan, I think, is a little bit more relevant, has a little bit higher of a ceiling. Also very prone to getting blown up, though, too. So we're taking shares of bats on both sides. We're taking reluctant shares of pitching on both sides. And we're moving on to Coors Field. Joker's excited. Joker loves Coors Field. Last game of the slate, buddy. Then we'll go for a walk. Shouldn't have said the W word. We got the Rockies lineup. I think I've got it in the model already. I do. We don't have the Dodgers lineup yet. So who's excited to roster Chase Anderson in this one? 15.2% strikeout rate, 5.12 xFIP, 5.79 ERA. Out of the low-end pitchers, I just think you can see it. He's got a single-digit projection in my FanDuel model. That says it all. Out of everybody on this slate, Chase Anderson's the guy I would probably fade. I would just take him out. I just don't see upside here. Not in this spot, not against this Dodgers team, not with a 22.7% CSW, 15.2% strikeouts. Last year was 22.3% in 24 innings. The year before was 16.3% in 48 innings. Just hasn't pitched a lot over the last few years. Has been really low end when he has pitched. 5.79 ERA, a 5.12 xFIP. Tons of home runs allowed so far, 5.98% home run rate. I just don't see it here. I really see no reason to go to that. I'm a little bit interested on the other side in Sheehan. I think Sheehan would be, against this Rockies lineup in any other ballpark in the league, would be a lot more interesting in this spot. It's tough. 7,400 could be a little bit cheaper. DK, I think he's definitely relevant, though, where you need 2 pitchers. I think he's on the board. 8,300, you can see it's an okay projection. Like it's only a strikeout off of the silly projection we've got for Waino. It's higher than some of these other guys. It's competitive with Taijuan. It's certainly not Max Scherzer, who's 14 and change points ahead. But for a fastball slider pitcher who works horizontally, not vertically, there's some potential there for Sheehan. 2 starts, went 6 innings in both. Didn't strike out a ton of guys, but you like the idea that he's gone those 6 innings and has the leash if everything goes well. I want to pull the game log back up. In the 2 starts, 3 strikeouts in the first game against the Giants, 4 strikeouts in the second game against the Astros, 2 home runs allowed in the Astros game, pitched a no-hitter over 6 in the Giants game. No hits, no runs, 2 walks, 3 strikeouts. Obviously, we're not getting a no-hitter at Coors Field tonight. I doubt that he gets extended beyond 6 innings, but 6 innings of 2-3 run ball with a handful of strikeouts, 3-4 strikeouts. Again, we're just hunting for a couple value plays on this slate, a couple shares of break glass in case Max Scherzer goes pop type shares on FanDuel. I think is totally justifiable. At 7,400, I think a handful of SP2 shares at the very least is totally justifiable. The Rockies, even with Coors included, are one of the worst lineups in baseball. There are plenty of good justifiable reasons to go to a kid who's not a premium prospect by any means, but a kid that they expect to pitch at the major league level for a few years for them. A mid-teens ranked prospect organizationally who's shown a little bit of life at the major league level. Not a lot, but a little bit. There's good reason to go to Sheehan here. Small doses, not 50 shares, 10 shares, 15 shares, some in 150 lineups. If you're building 5 lineups, I don't think you need it. You can go there. You can, get a little bit. He'll be very low owned. So I think you can. It's probably not necessary. Like you're probably going to shares of Taijuan, shares of Hendo, shares of Bassett, obviously at high ownership before you go to that play, but maybe a couple. Do I need to tell anybody to play the Rockies at Coors Field today? We're just basically making that game theory decision. With Chase is what happens to him when he's on the mound. League average pitchers can have a something start. Seeing him on Domingo. Yeah, exactly. Right. What we did talk about yesterday with Domingo is that he's an extreme strike thrower. He throws a ton of strikes for somebody who's not like a highly regarded pitcher. But yeah, league average type guy overall, league average output, league average strikeout rate, league average numbers. Went out, put a perfect game last night after 2 total clunkers in a row of starts. So baseball's weird. That's how it works. So, could you get 5-6 clean innings against the Dodgers out of Chase Anderson? Sure. But you are out on a limb on that one, in my opinion. Dodgers is such chalk donkey night, right? So that's what I was getting into. You're making the game theory decision. You're saying, hey, do I want to walk down the path with all of the slate with me? They're going to be massively popular today. All the key bats are going to be extremely popular. They're all also very, very expensive. It's difficult to string all those guys together. 44, 45, 41 for the top three hitters on FanDuel, 63, 61, 6,000 for those guys on DK. No real discount on Max Muncy at 55.37. JD Martinez 57.39 for all his power output. Those are the five guys you want. And then you can get into options like David Peralta at 35.28 is a good hitter, good veteran, capable veteran bat who will probably float himself above league average for run creation after tonight, after a good night. Jason Hayward, good lefty bat late in the lineup with power. James Outman, same story. Miguel Vargas, productive right-handed bat with 7 home runs on the season, only an 85 WRC plus, 198, 301, 371. So we don't want to get carried away with Vargas shares, but I think all those guys are going to be popular too, because those guys pay for the other guys. You need to roster shares of those guys. Even in 3-man stacks, it's hard to build all three of those, 3 of the top 5 hitters in together. So I think it's going to be a spot where we're probably going to it, but we're probably undercutting. That's what I got back to, fortunately, with Coors last night. And, it was like I said yesterday, I had gotten carried away with Coors in a couple spots, and I don't really like that. I'm typically getting away from Coors as much as I can. And I think on a weirdly shaped slate, where, like I said, that's the inflection point and Max is the inflection point. If I'm choosing between those two, I think I'd rather take shares of Max with the field than the Dodgers. Like, there's just more reliability on the mound than there's more volatility at the plate. The Dodgers could have a good game, score 5 or 6 runs, not be overly DFS relevant, win the game going away, and you still got stuck with most of the field and still didn't distinguish yourself anywhere else in your lineup. So I think that's the approach I'm taking with the Dodgers. I'll have some. I'll mix and match them. I'll get them with lower owned teams, lower owned pitchers, etc., etc. I don't want a full fade by any means, but it's not a great spot on a short slate. And that affords you the ability to spread out to so many other positions that are all so under owned. So in other lineups, when you don't go to Max, and like I said, I'll have Max probably around with the field. In those other lineups, when you don't go to Max, then it affords you the opportunity to go to like Brewers against Max at extreme ownership while also still fading the Dodgers, and you're just way far afield from the field. You don't want to do that too many times because Max is likely to shut the Brewers down, but you do want to take up a little bit of a position against his ownership, I think. So that just, the more shares you go away from the Dodgers, the more opportunities you have to get to everything else when everybody's going to be going to this. So there's a lot of ways to go. Steve Lewitt says, I like mini stacking Dodgers to get a piece of that game and take shots elsewhere. Yeah, that's a viable approach. I think you can go like a Muncy Martinez Peralta or Muncy Peralta Hayward stack in the middle of the lineup if that's how it falls, or like a Will Smith Muncy Martinez stack and offset a little bit of popularity from Mookie and Freddie. But obviously, for every time you go to the Dodgers and skip Mookie and Freddie, one of the a baseball angel dies and goes to hell. That's I was going to say gets its wings, but that's the opposite of what I meant. So it's just, it's difficult to get away from these guys because they're so good. They're good at every ballpark. You would want massive shares of these guys against Chase Anderson if they were playing in Los Angeles tonight. If they were playing in Oakland tonight in an extreme pitcher's park, you would still want tons and tons of Dodgers against Chase Anderson. So difficult to get away from, but good game theory reasons to get away from it, I think, on this slate, or undercut it. Find a nice little channel to get below the field, but still have some. On the other side, going against Sheehan, who, like I said, I think is an effective kid, but certainly can be got by some of these bats. We know what I think of Profar and Tovar off the top. Tovar's a highly regarded rookie. He's the one that makes sense to give these plate appearances to. You should just stick him in the leadoff spot, kick Profar off the team, DFA Profar, or put him at the bottom of the lineup or something, and give Tovar the lead spot. But 266, 301, 432, 166 ISO, 82 WRC plus, 7 homers. Like, he's at least been moderately effective for the cheap prices, Tovar. So you can go to some Tovar, some McMahon, some Diaz, some CJ Cron, obviously, with all his power upside. It's not a completely inept version of the Rockies lineup. You're getting a productive catcher in Diaz at cheap prices. You're getting McMahon on the correct side of his splits for hitting for some of his power. 215 ISO overall, a dozen home runs for Ryan McMahon. Multi-position eligible on the FanDuel slate. CJ Cron with all his power upside back in the lineup, 8.42 in the home run model. It's not a great number. You can see everybody on the Dodgers basically is above that, but Cron does have major power upside against a young pitcher who's going to probably leave one or two over the plate for him to hit. Nolan Jones from the left side, I like that bat. I think he's a key bat in this lineup. 5 home runs, 5 steals, 320, 409, 550. That's who should be hitting second in this lineup. So you go, if the Rockies are listening, let's adjust this lineup before game time. We want to go Tovar, Jones, McMahon. Diaz is fine hitting cleanup, although I'd probably go Cron. Cron, Diaz, Diaz, Cron, either way. And then Randall Grichuk, Elias Montero, Harold Castro, and then Jurickson Profar. That's what we want to do with this lineup, Colorado. Come on. Trey says, I really like 2 through 6 for Colorado. Yeah, that's where the quality is going to be. I would bolt Grichuk and Montero into that as well. The Grichuk is a proven hitter over time. He's hitting more for hit tool ability this year than power, but has a little bit of power upside. 294, 357, 429, 99 WRC plus. He's been moderately relevant for a $4,100, $3,400 outfielder. A little high priced actually on FanDuel, but for 41 in the outfield on DK, I think that's fine. And then Montero's like a premium prospect, highly regarded kid in their system. Hasn't done anything so far. 104 plate appearances, 2 home runs, 202, 231, 323, a 32 WRC plus. But a kid who is a highly regarded bat in the lineup in Coors Field. That's what you're getting there. Hal Castro playable from the bottom of the lineup. So yeah, I'll take my shots with some Rockies. I'm hoping they're fairly underowned. Yeah, Trey, Profar is one that I haven't been able to bring back from the dead so far this season. But yeah, cue the Profar double dong, 2 stolen base, 50 FanDuel points night at Coors Field at 2% ownership. Definitely upside for that. He's a guy who's not, bereft. Josh Donaldson, another home run. 2-run homer for Donaldson. I don't know why I'm looking at my phone to see it when I've got the game on the TV over there. I haven't looked that way the entire time. I forgot the game was on. I guess Donaldson ripped another one. Yeah. Bomb. Damn. Crushed it to left center. That's a shot in the Coliseum. Dead left center field. That's a big shot. JD's still got power for all his flaws, for as big of an asshole as he seems like. Still does have power. Sells out for home runs these days. Larry C says Tovar's the home run pick. Tovar, Profar, either way. So, yeah, some Rockies bats. Tepid interest in Emmett Sheehan shares. I do think you want to go there across 150 lineups for tournaments. I think there's a little bit of viability there. No real interest in Chase Anderson. He's the one pitcher I would kind of scratch off my board today in Coors Field. Dodgers, game theory, get away from it, undercut it a little bit for game theory reasons, spread out some of those shares. Rock and roll with some Rockies. Volpe single. I want to hear Volpe single day after day. I don't care if I hear Volpe home run the rest of the season. I want to hear Volpe single day after day. Volpe stolen base. Boost that on base percentage. Stephen Leibowitz says none of you remember Cesar Tovar. I don't remember Cesar Tovar. Is he a baseball player? I don't remember him. He was 1965 to 76, before my time. 5'9", played in the outfield. Played for Minnesota, Philadelphia, Texas. 46 home runs and 6,177 plate appearances. A .090 career ISO. Created runs 1% better than average for his career though. 22.1 WAR. Seems like a moderately effective guy. Did he steal bases? Yeah, a lot of stolen bases. 226 stolen bases in his career. Moderately effective guy that I was not really aware of. Passed away in 1994 at the age of 54 years and 11 days. That's kind of sad. Anyway, what a note to round the show out on. Let's talk pitching board real quick. Got it up on the stream here, I think. Yeah. So it's Max. It's Max and everybody else. I think Bassett makes sense as the second projected guy there. I talked about the Waino projection, still some lingering, quality from years past in there that I don't fully believe is on display this year anymore. Very, very limited opportunity for Waino. But even that projection is like just a handful of clean innings and a handful of strikeouts. So it's not like we're getting carried away with the projection. It's just everybody else is also extremely limited on this slate. So it's Scherzer. I'll go to the field with Scherzer. If I'm undercutting on a pitcher that is one of the better options of the day, it's probably Bassett. If the field's 20 plus on Bassett, I'm happy to come in 10, 12, 15, somewhere around there. Just grab a few shares to give to Taiwan, to JP France, to Kyle Hendricks. Beyond that, Wayno is a total dart throw as a value play. Sheehan is a little bit pricey as a value play at Coors Field, but I think he can do it. Taiwan, I think, is probably the second or third most reliable actual option on the slate here. The price is way up at 95, but the ownership will be low on FanDuel. He'll probably be fairly popular on DK at 88, but I wonder if JP France is going to be more popular at 8,000 against the Cards than Taiwan against the Cubs at 88. That's an interesting spot. Whichever one of those guys is less popular, I think you could just make the decision on that. They project out basically the same. The matchup probably worse for France than it is for Taiwan, but it's not great for Taiwan either. They're about the same level of pitcher. Adrian Hauser is at least super, super cheap. Might limit the home run upside of the Mets while not finding many strikeouts, but we've got, 5-6 pitchers on this slate that we're talking about with low teens to mid-teen strikeout rates. We're not going to have big strikeout totals. Outside of Max, maybe Bassett finds some. Maybe Taiwan gives you 5-6. France maybe. But everybody else on this slate is low end for strikeouts. So it's a night where we're going to win with bats. It's a night where we're going to win with weird pitching, especially if Max doesn't get there. If Max gets there, then you just need Max and you win with bats. If Max doesn't get there, this thing's going any number of directions. Because then you get, even if Bassett delivers at 89-96 with a lot of popularity, if you get competitive starts out of a Walker, a Hendricks, a France, a Sheehan, any of those guys at lower prices and a lot less popularity, that still stays competitive with a good Bassett outing. It's really just the dominant Max performance that is the not wild card. It's fairly likely. It's the big inflection point for the slate. If you don't get that, even in a good Bassett day, this could go any direction. So it's going to be a fun one. Volpe stolen base. All right. Let's get him on base. Let's steal some bases. I don't care if he hits home runs. He's been that aggressive approach. I like a kid who's aggressive at the plate, but I mean, he's just been over the top aggressive, trying to win ball games and hit 10-run homers. And it's just, baseball doesn't work that way. Hopefully it slows down for him. Hopefully he just starts, base knocks, start aiming some base hits. Take a page out of the Luis Arraez book and just aim some base hits. That's what Jeter used to be great for. When he wasn't going right for extra bases and big knocks and stuff, he was always able to hit the ball the other way with that inside-out swing and just inside out a single in a big spot and get himself on base and be a key contributor that way. That's what Volpe's got to learn to do. Anyway, brings us up to 5:08. We went an hour and 8 minutes on a 5-game slate with a lot of weird stuff to talk about. Fun day hanging out in the chat. Good luck to everybody out there in the chat. Somebody go win something. Let's take something down today. Let's have somebody book a nice little 5-6 figure payday. That would be pretty sweet. 5 figures is realistic. Is there a 6-figure payout today? Probably not on a 5-game short slate, but nice little 5-figure payout would be good for somebody. So go win that. Good luck out there, gang. I'm going to go punch out, build some lineups. I'll see you later.